Welcome to BookHuddle. I'm your host, Karen Reader with Readgab. Today, our guest is Daniel Nayeri, and this is so awesome because he just got a second Newberry Honor just this week. Like when I was watching it as they were being read, and I was like, I'm interviewing him this week. Oh, I'm so excited. So,
You're the
oh,
first anything I've done in the last 3 days have just been nothing but just celebrating and answering a whole lot of emails and texts.
yay!
So thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I'm back in the professional world, I'd say.
Yay. Oh, well, big congratulations. This is just awesome. And I'm sorry I have not read the Nomad Teacher of Nomadland yet. I'm going to listen to
Yeah,
it and
there it is.
beautiful cover. But I
Yeah,
am
take a listen. This is
to
one I read as well, so I can just read it to you.
yes.
You don't even have to
Yes.
read.
And it's
Yeah.
so fun because I was like, hey, I already know what his voice sounds like because I was listening to Samir, the Seller of Dreams. Is that the complete title?
I'm an inveterate long titler, so it's
Yes.
the many assassinations of
Many
Samir
assess.
the
Oh,
Seller.
how could I forget
Right.
about that? Yeah,
Yeah,
the first lines start with the first time I was killed. There was something.
that's right.
The first time I
Yeah.
was stoned to death. Daniel, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Oh, sure. Well, my name is Daniel Nayeri. I was born in Iran, and when I was about 5, my mother converted to Christianity, so we became refugees and left. And for about 2 years, we were in transit, and then came to the United States. So I sort of had my formative years in Oklahoma, from 8 to 18, and then from there went to New York and became an editor of books. I've been a book person all my life. My first real job with like a real paycheck was
Oh,
as a library page in Edmond, Oklahoma, and then went straight into publishing as quickly as I could. And so I was an editor and finally a publisher for about 20 years. All that time, my dream was to be a writer. So I was writing, on the weekends and on my commute back home. And so I've been publishing for just kind of an overlapped amount of time for about 15 years. Most of my work is in the kids space. I've written all over the sort of card catalog, as you'd say. I've edited every kind of thing you can
okay.
imagine, from cookbooks to memoirs to
Right.
adult fiction, adult history, all the way to, pick board books, maze books, everything. My writing tends to keep me, my sweet spot, the spot that I love is like middle grade adventure. That's kind of, if you let me write
Because it's the
whatever's on my
best.
heart, yeah, I really enjoy it. It's sort of a lot of the stuff I love in the works of the classics, like everyone from Dumas to Robert Louis Stevenson to the fairy tales, but also, the Arabian Nights. That's all stuff that we think of as the canon, but really, if you were to play in those genres nowadays, which is kind of what I goof around in,
Right.
it's most natural to be on the either in the fantasy world for the adults or here in the middle grade space. Adult sort of literary fiction doesn't always have swashbuckling musketeers as often as it should
Right.
anymore. So yeah, so I've always felt like it's been a natural sort of tradition where you kind of have those stories. And yeah, so that's sort of what I write nowadays. What else is there to say? I have a son. My wife and have one boy. He's 13. Goodness, I mean, I could go into all the other life details, but that's
Right.
sort of been my career.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Now I like to do an author icebreaker to get to know you based on a book. So we're going to
Okay.
do Ink Heart. There's a lot of books where you
Oh.
end up in the book. So if there was a book, you can pick either that you would hate to be pulled into or that you would just love to go and live amongst the characters. Where would you be sucked into, like completely? Not just like we're all sucked into books all the time, that we get to
Yeah.
experience another world, but you're actually going to go live there.
I'm gonna go live there. Oh my
At
gosh.
least temporarily. You're
Well,
going to spend a good month there at least.
I mean, yeah, you had a good question there where you said things could go bad because, I mean, if you want just total comfort and ease and joy, I mean, it's hard to beat the Shire
Yes.
for, just doing nothing but eating cheese boards and stuff and poppy cakes.
And then
But,
stay in the Shire.
I do love a book. I've loved stories where you have a very clear mission. So I suppose I would also love, for more cozy for what it's worth. I think there's a comic book series called Castle Waiting that's
Okay.
set in a nunnery, and the drama of it is entirely around like life
Uh-huh.
It's just like people not like so that's like very slice of life would be cozy. Freyrin as a manga would be pretty decent slice of life in a fantasy world where you could just hang out. Those would all be good chilling. But I kind of think the idea of maybe some of these stories that have like more difficult worlds,
Yes.
but where the mission is super clear, I might also enjoy. So I'm looking at my shelves here. What might be like I would love to have so many of the books I read are historicals and
Right.
they would be utterly dangerous. I would anytime you take me anywhere on the Silk Road, I would be so happy. So
Nice.
that would be good. You know, actually, I'm gonna do a loop. I would love to live in Brian Jake's fantasy. I would love to be one of those mice with a sword and then having a bunch
Nice.
of feasts. I'm switching it up. Take clear the decks. It's Brian Jake's. That's
All
where I want to
right.
live. He's got both. He's got the cozy feasting on little acorn
Yes.
cakes, and then he's got, the baddies show up and we got to snicker snack some swords. It'll be good.
I love it. And I love that you were just staring at your shelf. I spend a fair amount of time doing that.
Yeah.
Like I just sit there and look at my shelves, whether to come up with these author icebreaker questions. I just like stare at them and think books. So it really I enjoyed you sitting there looking at that. All right. So we mentioned before this Newberry that you got the honor twice now. The first one was the many assassinations of Samir, the dream seller.
The Seller of Dreams.
The
Yeah.
Seller of Dreams,
hmm
and then The Teacher of Nomadland.
Yeah.
So is the most recent one. So tell us briefly, let's think elevator pitch, since we are here to talk about the Bizarre Bazaar, and we will get to this wonderful
Sure.
graphic
Great.
novel. And but tell us briefly what these Newbery Honors are about.
Sure. So, wish I had a copy at hand for the Samir. So that one is set. It's on the 11th century Silk Road, where kind of like the Music Man, if you know that musical, there is this portly huckster merchant named Samir who goes from village to village swindling people, and each of them have gotten furious. And so, at the very beginning of the book, they find out that each of those villages has hired a different assassin to come and kill Samir. Now, the story is being told to you from this young boy who's his servant, his perspective. And the young boy, as a narrator, is not on his master's side. Like he is a very religious young man. So he says, my master's a liar and a kind of a con artist and a teller of tales. Like, to be very honest with you, he kind of deserves it. But each time the servant had to be the one to save him. And then he conveys to you very early on the first pages of the book, so I'm not spoiling anything, that he was the seventh and final and successful assassin. And so the whole story is actually the testimony of this young boy about the life of his master and how Samir, the seller of dreams, sort of met his end. And so that is the story. It's sort of a race along the Silk Road in the 11th century. That was
And
about 2 years ago that came out.
just loved Samir. I'm
Thank
like
you.
50% the way through, and he has conned his way into my heart.
Oh,
Like
good.
nothing else.
Yeah.
I love the boy. Gosh, what is the boy?
He calls him
Omar.
Monkey, but his name is Omar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was trying to think. It's a name I
Yeah.
know. Okay, yes, I enjoy him too. I just love Samir. It's so crazy how well you did of having us also love this con man.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, he's sort of one of those larger than life type characters that I love writing. And actually, this is an interesting pairing because I recently did an event with a bunch of teachers in Taiwan, and one of the first questions they asked was about the styles. Samir is written in this sort of like epic, kind of poetic adventure story. The prose is very elevated, and the style is kind of cartoonish, right? There's
Right.
like six assassins, and they're from all over the world, and there's a little bit of comedy there. Much more spare and much more realistic, set in a very different time in history, is The Teacher of Nomadland. And this is the story about a particular moment in World War II. It's called the Anglo-Soviet invasion of Iran. So in 1941, the world was discovering that World War II was going to hinge on one resource. And it was the first time where the resource of petroleum was going to determine kind of the strategic advantage of the war. And so everyone was looking around going, how do we get some and make sure our opponent doesn't get any? And so the Allies at this time, Churchill and Stalin, the British and the Soviets, got together and they preemptively invaded Iran in order to maintain all the petroleum there, and keep it out of the hands of Hitler. A lot of people believe that if Hitler got his hands on that petroleum, he would have sort of steamrolled across
Right.
not only Europe and London, but also maybe Soviet Union. And so it was the right move for them strategically, but for the people of Iran, it was a 6 year occupation where
Not appreciated.
well, yeah, unfortunately, when you look back at history, it also paired with some of the worst harvests in the history of the country. So it was a devastating kind of moment in the
Wow.
time in the history of Iran. And so, but it follows this brother and sister who have just lost their father in that invasion. He has died. He was not a soldier, he was a teacher, and he was teaching the nomads in the hill country when the soldiers came in. And so the brother and sister who desperately want to stay together, they do not want to be separated with as orphans, decide that maybe the brother could go into the mountains and take up his dad's job as the teacher to the nomads. And so he and his sister can stay together. And there is a cohort of teachers in Iran who, because the nomads travel back and forth across this really perilous mountain pass,
Yeah.
they just strap blackboards onto their backs and march into the mountains and do
Wow.
classes out in the open air. And so that's what they try to do. While they are in the mountains, they meet a young boy who is on the run. I will not tell you why, but from a very villainous Nazi spy. And so the war sort of comes home to these two children who are just really trying to survive in the mountains and find the nomads at the time. So it's kind of a story about obviously a moment in history, but also kids trying to survive in the wild. And yeah, so that was the one that just came out. And
That
no,
Newberry. Oh,
yeah,
tell us the reaction. They call you, right? On the phone
goodness,
to tell
yeah.
you how.
You act like an idiot. I don't know what else to do. Like you get a call and it's so, because they call, they'll be like, "Hi, my name is so and so. I am the chair of the Newberry Committee,"
Yeah.
right? Or and they say that it's a long title. But like the whole time, the whooshing starts at the moment
Right.
of like, this isn't a call about whether or not I want to sell my house. And so,
Good.
so all of a sudden, you're like, well, okay, okay, okay. And because of that time where they're talking and cheering and it's delightful, it's just enough time for the whooshing to take over
Uh-huh.
and for you to just babble a bunch of
Oh,
doofy stuff. So you say thank you,
of
but
course.
how many times can you say thank you?
Right.
You say, thank you, thank you. Like I wish you understood from across the phone, all 12 of you,
Yes.
that you've kind of given me this like lifelong treasure, and I'll try not to ruin it. And thank you. And it's kind of a really what's the right word? It's like manic and joyful, and at the same time my son and my wife are like, is it them? Is it them?
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
like, and you're trying to mouth it's them. And so it's yeah, I don't know if ever for me, I've been lucky enough to get a couple calls in my life.
That's awesome.
Um, and each time I spend the next 3 hours going, did they think I was an idiot? Like, did they re reconsider that like that guy was
Never
not
mind.
articulate?
Award
Like
rescinded.
because he's not good with words. And so and or that he didn't seem grateful enough. Like did he what did he think? We were also going to give him a car, and then they maybe are going to take it away from me. Like the next morning they won't even announce my name. They'll be like, he was ungrateful.
He was
I'm like, oh my
ungrateful.
God, please. I'm
It
trying
depends on
so
how grateful they are if we switch it. We have some backups.
I believe this. I know this sounds like there's no way they would be that mean, but some part of me thinks like I might have flubbed the interview. Like that's what it is. It
Interview.
feels like an interview. Like, would you like to have this award? And I'd be like, yes, please, please give it to me. And then they're like, well, I don't know. I don't know.
I don't
We feel
know.
like maybe if you had said something
Mhm.
like, this reminds me of the time when the great author and thinker Italo Calvino said, and then you quote something really incredible and like
Profound.
pertinent and
He must
profound,
be
and they'd be like, him,
him.
he's getting the medal, and then that's it. I didn't do that. I just said thanks a lot. So,
Which is
yeah.
exactly what you should say. Poor authors, their emotions are just jerked around from the first moment, actually, probably even before they start submitting to agents, because
Oh,
they're just like, am I good enough? And then there's going to be all kinds of imposter syndrome. And then they love their manuscript and then they hate their manuscript and the best writer and worst writer. And then they've got to send it off to people that just tear it apart and rip their emotions out of their chest. And now
yeah.
you just live with that's how you feel when you get an award.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I having been an editor for 20 years, we try to hold tight. So you just described like the sweetest writer in the world. Sometimes it's the other way around, and you have to be
Uh-huh.
like, hey, hey, knock, knock, please let me get through your ego here.
Uh-huh.
We'd like you to change one sentence. And they're like,
But
how
no,
dare
I'm the
you?
best. Like Wednesday
How
Addams.
dare?
I will
Yeah,
not change a
exactly.
word.
Yes, exactly. So it can go in lots of directions, but you're right. It is yeah, it's one of those jobs as with anything like you're making something, right? And it's your
Yeah.
baby and you just yeah, it can be hard to it can be hard to disassociate yourself enough from it to be able to
Yeah.
talk about it neutrally,
Right.
right? But
Right.
yeah,
Oh my goodness. Okay. So
so
one thing
that was the
I noticed
call, yeah.
as I was looking at which books I would listen to on Libby is you're a master of being able to keep things short, which you've got to be if you're going to go and write a graphic novel. You got to be good at
Yes.
short. And so, was it hard or was it just like that's the length for Samir and Nomad Teacher? That's just how they came to be. How did
Yeah.
you become a writer of few words?
That's funny you say that. I mean, I often feel like I bloviate too much, but Samir started out as a short story and Teacher started out as a picture book. So Teacher of Nomadland started out as like 700 words.
Okay.
And so in some ways I feel like Teacher of Nomadland is the long version, but
Right.
you're right. It's very short. It's kind of
Comparatively, yeah.
it's in the world of, and I'm going to say a bunch of names of books that I adore that I wouldn't compare myself to, but only in word length. There's a great tradition of middle grade that's like everything from Charlotte's Web to Midwife's Apprentice to Long Walk to Water. What else? The Whipping Boy. And it's sort of that era of the 80s and 90s. The Giver is quite short, right?
Yeah.
So it's like those were the books that I grew up with and they're kind of middle grade at that,
Yes.
it's young. And I know a lot of kids who, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
I don't mind, they'll look at a book and they'll look at it this way first. They
Yeah.
want to know how much commitment you're expecting. So I think about that a lot. I think about can I deliver this world and this story? It's hard when you've got to deliver the history of World War II at a part
Oh,
where kids don't even know necessarily World War II, much less Iran's part in it, which is
right.
not a
I had no idea. I love that
yeah,
this is like an aspect I had never heard of because World War II has
yeah,
got to be the most popular historical
by
fiction.
far, by
But
far.
so neat that you have a very different aspect going on.
Yeah, so that was in that sense, length is not your friend all of a sudden when you're needing to explain all that. But overall, I think that's something that I've tried to hone over the course of my career is to somehow deliver as much as you need to do. A long time ago, I wrote a lot of short stories, and the problem with those was nobody knew what's going on. I was being too subtle, and
Ah,
so
okay.
I sort of wrenched the wheel the other direction, went long for a lot of pieces, and now I'm finally starting to put those two skills together. So, I couldn't tell you how or why it happened, or I couldn't tell you how it happened, but I could tell you why, which is that's sort of the space I'd like to live.
Nice. I feel like it is the best thing. And there are many, many very long middle grade books that I enjoy, either
Sure.
reading off the pages or listening to them. My gosh, one of my favorites is I'm thinking of the most recent one. Silverborn. Oh, here we go. Jessica Townsend. She's one of my
Uh-huh.
favorites, and it just
Yeah.
gets longer, and it's so long, and I didn't even blink an eye when the number of hours, because that's how I judge it, actually,
Sure.
is
Oh,
not
yeah.
page length, but I go and check if there's an audio and how many hours. That's more
Oh, that's a
something I
good
can
way.
understand. And I
Mhm.
know that I'll read it a little faster than the narrator. And so it didn't even, I was like, "No." But I'm often aiming for 4 to 5 hours is where I think that's like the
Oh, that's
sweet
good.
spot for middle grade in general. That I think you've got to be a really, really exceptional author to go above. But I also think an author is really exceptional that can keep it just 4 or 5 hours in length. I know that
Yeah.
most people don't grasp it that way. So I don't know what word count
Well,
means.
often I'll get that feeling, or one comment I'll get is people will be like, I wish I could have stayed in this world longer,
Okay.
and I take that as both a compliment, but at the same time, if I hear that enough, I will sort of think to myself, well, was there more that I could have offered? Like, was
Okay.
this a sad, it's I used to be a chef for a long time, a pastry chef,
Nice.
and there's this thing we do with eating, right? Like where sometimes people will be like, I'm full, I'm just eating for the flavor.
Yes.
And you go, okay, I don't want to take you there, right?
Right.
I'm glad you loved the flavor, but once you're satisfied and it was a properly satisfying meal, I'm no longer interested in helping you gorge on it in the way
Right.
that I feel like some readers would just be like, I just want to sit with these characters. And there are some of my favorite formats, like, and I know we're going to segue to comics because I think that's one of the strengths of comics,
Yes.
and manga in general is I just love this world. I just want to like watch these characters play
Yes.
baseball. And you're like, okay, but them playing baseball,
Slowest
like,
moving sport.
yeah, is not part of a novel. Like, it's
Right.
not what I'm going to offer you for a middle grade adventure because I want this plate to be exactly portioned properly.
Yeah.
But there are, I think, formats where if you are trying to stay in the world and enjoy yourself, I think comics is a great one for that. Obviously, long form television. We just want to see people living their lives. That's
Yes.
a great one. It's not great for film, right? I
Right.
don't like let's
Right.
let's cut these to the proper length.
Yes, and I think you nailed it. And I think that is a skill that you have right there. Because then you went after mastering, 4 or 5 hours in length on a middle grade, you got into graphic novels. What made you start the Bizarre Bazaar?
Goodness. Well, so I've always been a comics person, right? So
Right.
like books and comics, as I said, have kind of been my life. When I was in college, one of the first jobs I ever got was at Midtown Comics, which is kind of
Mhm.
this big comic book shop in Times Square. And it's a wild shop to work in because it's just
Right.
thousands of people coming through all the time. And that's kind of where I began my comics education in earnest. And so for a long time, I've got many, many manuscripts of sort of comics scripts, which are very different than
Right.
novels. And as we kind of alluded to before, I tend to think that, I'll think of a story. Like
Right.
what if there was a, rabbit who, mermaid who, whatever.
Yeah.
And very quickly as I'm developing the thought, one of the questions that's kind of popping up in my head is what kind of story is this? Is this a picture book? Is this a middle grade novel? Is this a film? Is this a TV show? Is it like a video game, a board game? Like what are we talking about?
Right.
And a lot of that has to do with what I want to convey in the story and what is going to be naturally the strengths and weaknesses of the format. So, as I mentioned before with Teacher, I initially thought that story was going to be really short,
Right.
picture book length. I really wanted the imagery of those mountains
Right.
on the page. So I wanted 32-page picture book.
Yeah.
When my editor kind of got a hold of it, he was like, actually, I feel like it might be a novel. And so I said, well, let me go back. So I'm not saying that I'm right all the time.
Okay.
But I am trying to find the right format.
Yes.
So with Bizarre Bazaar, the story, the concept was born out of me kind of loving anthology stories. In the 80s, this was huge in TV shows. Obviously, we have some now, but in the 80s, we had things, even before, obviously, there was things like the Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Masterpiece Theater, The Twilight Zone, the Tales from the Crypt, all the kind of eerie tales that
Mhm.
you had. And what those were the anthology sort of series was born out of the 1950s when these TV channels needed content. And so they were buying all these B movies. And the movies would be things like They Came from Outer Space, but also horror movies like The Swamp Monster, and then also kind of like thriller spy stuff. And it was all just kind of genre pulp stuff. And they were like, well, we bought all these movies. How do we put them in a block in an hour and make them feel like of a piece? And what they would do is they would have what is called a horror host. And so the host would come on TV and it would be like Sven and they would kind of be in their little space. And Laura Linney does this with Masterpiece Theater now, right? She's the host. You go to her living room in her manor, and she says, and with the Crypt Keeper, he'll do a little pun. He'll say, like, greed can make you lose your head, but for this one banker, it was real. And then he laughs, and then you cut into the story. And as a kid, in the 80s, this was huge. Nowadays, we have like Black Mirror. They don't really have a host, but we have like Twilight Zone coming back. There were comedy versions of this, like Steve Martin had his own for a while. It was called the George Burns Comedy Hour. And for the longest time as a kid, I didn't understand. I was like not I was not from the United States, but also I was
Right.
unsupervised around television, which was probably a bad call. But I would see these and I'd be like, what's going on with this? Like,
Right.
why isn't that person in the story? Like,
Yeah.
especially with the Crypt Keeper or those kinds of figures that are a little bit more fantastical. He's like a ghoulish looking character.
Right.
I would be like, why isn't there like he's a monster. Like, why isn't there like a monster hunter kicking his door down or something? Like, why isn't he the bad guy in a movie?
Right.
And so for the longest time, and of course, as a storyteller, you've probably already understood that the reality of why the frame is not inside the episode is because they need those frames to be completely interchangeable, right? We don't want the story of the Crypt Keeper to move forward in time because you can watch any of those episodes and you just see him
Yes.
where he is and he introduces the movie. So linearity is the issue there.
Yes.
Well, a long time ago, I wanted to pitch this comic book series where we have horror hosts. We have
Yes.
the anthology show hosts, and they're in the form of these two, which
Right.
is Babs and Bruno.
Hmm.
Bruno is sort of my like very punctilious. Think like. I mean, honestly, I want these two to be like a classic 1940s pair, like
I
Hepburn
love
and
the way they
Tracy.
banter so much.
Yeah, the banter is very much so I would love her to be Hepburn. I would love him to be Tracy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They are the shopkeepers of this place called the Bizarre Bazaar. The Bizarre Bazaar is a shop outside of time and space. We've seen this kind of thing, the curio shop in the stories where every object has a story to tell. And there are things like the monkey's paw and magic lamp or, all these kinds of various props and all the tales passing strange. So that's the setup, right? The initial setup is simply you're going to open the book, you're going to go into the Bizarre Bazaar. Babs and Bruno, the shopkeepers, the proprietors, are going to tell you a story of a particular object. In this case, the first one is this mirror where this boy falls in and goes into the mirror version of his town. And another one is these girls in the farm, and they are certain there's a vampire hiding out on the family farm, and no one believes them.
Oh, those girls
And
are such great characters too.
thank you. And this is one just came out like a couple weeks
Yes.
ago.
Yes.
And there's going to be four total at first, and then we'll
Okay.
see. But they're like the movie, the episodes are like Goosebumps, right?
Hmm.
So while like bad things can happen, like we're kind of keeping it at that level,
Yes.
there's not, that kind of the extreme PG-13ness of it all.
Right.
But now the twist, right? For Daniel, there always has to be something like proper difficult. And I said to myself, all right, but here's the twist that these two, Babs and Bruno, do not like, as with the other hosts, leave you at when the fade out
Right.
happens. They stay on screen. They are kind of like always on the frame.
There they
Almost
are.
like there you
Just keep
go.
sticking their heads in the story.
That's very much. Do you know those Muppets, Waldorf and Statler, the old guys who just make fun
No.
of? They're like they're the two Muppets. They're two old guys, and they're
Oh,
usually
oh,
in a computer
from the Muppets. Yeah.
from the Muppets.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and they think everything is funny that like happens that's bad.
yeah. And
That's
they just
that's these two.
yeah.
Yeah, they think kids are dumb, and
Kids are dumb.
they just make fun of the kids the whole time. They make fun of they're kind of there to be not only comedic relief, but
Uh-huh.
what you start to realize over the course of these books is that the main characters here are these two, Babs and Bruno,
Yeah.
and their story is moving forward. And what you're discovering is that Babs and Bruno are not the proprietors of the Bizarre Bazaar. They are the prisoners of the Bizarre
Yeah.
Bazaar. And that the Bizarre Bazaar is actually the biggest supermax prison in all of these seven worlds. And they are considered the two worst criminals in all of those seven worlds. And slowly you start to get their backstory. Slowly you start to get the fact that they have been there for hundreds of years and want to escape. And I won't tell you any more after that because that will take you too far into their story. But that's the kind of the idea is what if the frame was the story, right? And what if you were getting these episodes about these kids, but you're also learning about this big epic around Babs and Bruno? And that was how that started. So yeah.
Well, I'm excited about it too because a lot of times what I'm aiming for is doing themes and how can you use this as the adult in the child's life, whether you're a teacher, parent, librarian. So in the classroom or library, you
Yeah.
could do something as simple as, and I know so many people are so hesitant to use graphic novels, but there's so many things you could do with this because the very simplest thing You could say, all right, Tales Passing Strange. I want you to get in groups. It won't take them very long to read this. They're going to have a blast. And then make a list of everything and why this book is strange.
Right.
And that could be a simple step one. And then there could be conversations that can go from there. And I think adults are missing a really good opportunity to use graphic novels in the classroom and
I
do more
agree.
with them.
Well, I'll show you a little thing real quick because one of the things that every one of the episodes does is show like a shot of the Bizarre Bazaar, right? So here
Yes.
is her, here's Babs kind of showing all these different props. Here's the one in the first one where you can see all these different things.
These creepy twins.
Right. And one of the things, I tend to do is like say like pick a prop and tell a story, like
Yes.
tell your own tale passing strange of, this diver or this sword over here or this particularly
Right.
weird pearl necklace. Can you tell that story? And so, yeah, I agree with you. Sort of putting
Oh, yeah. They
the
could do
prompt on
so
the
much
kid.
there. Yeah. Have the kids tell one of the stories, and
Very
they get to
much.
be a Babs and Bruno kind of thing, teammate together. Oh, that's
That's right.
so much great stuff. Love it. Can you tell me, did you find your illustrator or did the publisher pair you with the illustrator?
Yeah, no, not at all. I landed with Little Brown, a particular editor by the name of Andrea Colvin, and she's been an editor of comics for a long time. So she had the initial person with a series like this. You sort of have two first jobs, right?
Mhm.
You have the first book, but you also have to set what is called the Bible, which is the how tall is Babs? How tall is Bruno?
Okay.
What is their uniform? What do they, here they are in their first
Yes.
initiate. Like everything that I don't in the script, of course, I describe quite a lot, but not to the extent of what an artist would do.
Right. Right.
And so you have to set also just frankly the font, right? Like the
Yes,
what
that's
is
important.
once
Absolutely.
you establish this, now of course
Yeah.
you see they've changed their poses,
Right.
which and this artist is a different artist, but they've stayed on model for this, and now you can see the art style is different here. So
Mm.
because each of the artists is a different one for each. I'm sorry, I'm using all my fingers and I'm not a pianist, so I don't know how to do it. My son could do this. He plays guitar. There they are, Leslie and Liz in one and two, and then there are two more doing the next
No, I
two.
didn't realize that. Okay.
So what's fun about it is the frame kind of always stays on model, which is to say these two, but the
Okay.
inside the episode, and in fact, you'll really notice it with the third, who I'm really excited about. Emmanuel is a Spanish artist whose
Ooh.
style is very different than these two. And then the style of the fourth is even farther. So, my goal, my dream, this is one of those things where as an author, you sort of dream dreams. The contract sort of says, give us four and treat it as if it's like season one. So we want there to be a satisfying arc with the four in
Nice.
terms of Babs and Bruno's story. But if it succeeds and we want 40, because then, make sure you can do that too. And that's always the hardest, task to give to a writer, right? Like satisfying ending that also has loose ends
Right.
is basically what it means. I tried to do that. And the dream would be that if there's more and the audience sort of tells us if there's going to be more,
Yes.
then the art styles would vary greatly. And for, kind of to match each story, I would love to do animal fantasy episodes. And in those, like you would want to have a very different style as well. So yeah, so we'll see. We'll see how vast we can get. But in terms of the artists, each book gets its own artist. I've really loved that because
That
it's
is
kind of
neat.
allowed. Yeah.
So neat to start with that in mind. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
how often do people start with that, that you're like, I'm going to go with a different artist each time to have this unique thing because there's a different story going on each time that doesn't relate. I love that. I hadn't even
Yeah.
realized when because there were some that I realized when I was looking at the Mere Town, and
Mhm.
her hair is down, and so that was very different. But I didn't even think about it as much because I wasn't holding them side to side. Babs's hair is down in Mere Town,
Yeah.
and
Let me
so
see. Well, yeah, later it goes down, but here, let me see if I can find a comparison of these two. I mean, the artists really are, they were, kind of encouraged to, and even you'll see it if you're a real comics person, you'll even see it in like the paneling, right? You can see it. I mean, you don't have to be a comics person to see it here, but like, here's the first one. They're
yeah,
having this
yeah.
piece of dialogue, and she's like, it's all about her expression, right? His back is
Yes.
turned. It's
Yes.
this is it's a lot. But then here you have this kind of really the frame lines are
Yeah.
much more, what's the word? There's a lot of a manga influence here with just these angles or
Yes.
90s comics, right? They're not the sort of traditional square
Rectangulars. Yeah.
square grid, which, both are amazing. Like this is sort of a more American style. That's the delight of it, is you get to the artist sends in the sketches and we
See,
go,
it's so many different
that's
things.
so cool. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. What's next? When is book three going to be available?
6 months, well, 8 months, and it is called Riot at the Fairy Zoo. And it's
Me?
about a young man who finds himself captured by the fairies and becomes the human exhibit at the fairy zoo, and so it's a prison break story. And he's kind of a little bit of a brat. Like he's me playing with a main character who don't really like that much.
Okay.
But
Okay.
you put him in a fairy prison and things, you might sympathize after a while, hopefully. So this one's set in Texas. The first one, this young boy. This one's in North Carolina. That one is in Florida, and the fourth is about a young lady. She is in California, who
Right.
is filming herself doing a TikTok dance, and in the background, she accidentally captures Bigfoot. And so her video goes viral, but she does not love the reason, and
Of course.
so
Supposed to
we'll
be
go.
about the dance.
Supposed to be. Well, she's also terrible is the unfortunate part. So when you're young and you're, just getting started at a skill like dancing, the
Uh-huh.
worst thing that can happen sometimes is attention.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, she gets a
Well,
lot of.
let's put it on TikTok then, and we don't want some attention.
I know. Well, there's that. But so these two, yeah, this one just came out. So we're fresh on
Yes.
what is
The
called
number
Down
two.
a Dark Path.
Yes.
And it is this one's a really twist. This one's got a lot of twists in it. And
I
so
loved the twist so much. Did not see them coming. I kind of something with the dad, something, something, try not to give it away. But
uh-huh.
yeah, the other stuff, I was like, "Woo!"
Yeah, it's got a quadruple twist,
Yes,
which I was
loved
just,
it.
I think, which at one point, I think, because one of them is telling you the story and the other one's kind of,
Yeah,
Mystery Science Theater
yeah.
style, making fun. I think at one point,
Peanut
Bruno is
gallery. Yeah,
scolding, yeah, Peanut Gallery. He's scolding Babs because he's like, is this a quadruple twist? Like,
yeah.
are you serious? Like,
Serious?
no one, and at this point, you've lost everybody. So,
Yeah. Oh, I just have to show this too because I love this girl so much right
yes.
here.
Yeah.
I love the characters. The character development is just spot on. It's just so fantastic. If you are an adult who's just hesitant to get into the graphic novel scene for your children, I would recommend starting with the Bizarre Bazaar. You would have fun with them, and then there's so much more that you could take out of it past just them having an enjoyable quick read with pictures.
Oh,
So, yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. Do you have novels coming as well that you can share, or what anything else about what's next?
I do, yeah. Although, golly, what can I talk about? There is a middle grade project coming out in the fall that I can't quite talk about just yet, but
Okay.
we're going to announce soon. Is it my sort of very experimental take on a hero's journey? And it is a hero's, like the chapters are titled after the sections of a hero's journey. I've never really been a big hero's journey guy until what I wanted to do was kind of spend some time thinking about it,
Right.
thinking about the structure of kind of those stories. And so yeah, I took my crack at it. That's sort of as much as I can say. The thing I can talk about is I also have a picture book coming out in the fall that is a follow-up to one of my picture
Okay.
books that I wrote a picture book 2 years ago with a gentleman named Matt Rockefeller, and it is called Drawn Onward. And Drawn Onward is a palindrome as a phrase and as a book. The whole book is read forward and then you read it and then it goes backwards. It's like a V structure. Every image is mirrored, which means so the last
Okay.
image on the first page is a mirror of the last page, and so on and
Neat.
so forth until you get to the middle. It was a book that took years for someone as bright as Matt Rockefeller to kind of like visually puzzle together because it is when you look at it, you go, oh, how do you tell a
Just a
story?
little overwhelming when he was given that pitch, huh?
Yeah, he was up for the task, and in fact, he's been up for the task twice because Drawn Onward is a palindrome, as is Drawn Inward. And so,
Nice.
what is coming out? Drawn Onward was really beautiful. It was really well received. It was, but it was about a hard topic. It was about grief, and it was about this young boy sort of dealing with the grief of the loss of his mother, and that could be challenging. And we were really pleased with how it came out. Drawn Inward is a little bit more accessible, right? It's about him, this young boy, and his dad, and he has a classic tantrum, a classic sort of anxiety, moment where he's losing control and he's going through the house and his dad in the middle, as opposed to sort of the challenge of grief, his dad meets him right there at the middle and takes him through how do you like get control of your body again, right? When you lose your temper or when you lose your cool.
I
And
like it.
so
Love it.
yeah, so it's a little bit, I think it'll be something that people will find a little bit more common, certainly, than
Yes.
than the first. And it's just gorgeous. He's done that again. The whole book is cyclical again. The first page and the last page are mirrors all the way up. So it took 2 years for him to do it again,
Yeah.
because of how challenging it is. But Drawn Onward and Drawn Inward will be two. Drawn Inward is the one that's coming out that I'm just over the moon about how
That's
it's going to look.
excellent.
So
And it
yeah,
sounds like one that could span different ages, that you could use it for a picture
yeah.
book of the younger audience and then also like upper elementary, maybe even middle school.
Yeah, so as in the metadata, you're right, picture books kind of span two big categories. There's
Yes.
0 to 3,
Yes.
which this is not. Like good night, this is not for the good night moon
Not good night
child.
moon. Okay.
But the 3 to 6, right? We sort of lose those because often parents are sort of pushing that 6-year-old to get into chapter books
Yeah.
as much as possible. But the reality is that sort of six space, the 6, 7, 8. So we're talking kindergarten, first grade,
Yeah.
second grade, you're still reading picture books. Quite a lot of students are still reading picture books, and that's good.
Yeah.
One of my big encouragements for parents is don't think of reading as kind of a, what's the right word, as just like a trophy case.
Yeah.
It is very much something where, especially with a book as complicated as Drawn Inward, and especially early graphic novels,
Right.
um, the thing they're learning is not as much necessarily reading like
Right.
big blocks of text, and that's a different skill they should have.
Yes.
But the skill they're gaining here is the complexity of image text theory, right?
Yes.
And any parent, you can tell, is should know at this point that we're moving toward a very visual culture, that the entire internet is made up of image text pairs and not block text. Like, when was the last time you sat and read a blog that was 20,000 words long?
Right.
But any one of us who's scrolling on anything, we're seeing an image and a caption, an image and a caption. That is the language of the internet. The meme is the language of the internet.
Right.
That's going to be exercised and skillfully deployed by kids who are good at picture book reading, at graphic novel reading. It's a different skill. I want them, don't get me wrong. I'm a big, big believer also in deep focus
Yes. But
text
it's,
reading as well.
we should be able to use multiple and be able to
Yeah, yeah.
use
I
picture
look, be good
books
at
to
baseball
span
and football.
conversations. Yes.
Right. There's just two sports. That's all there's to it.
That's all. Yeah, exactly. Oh, love it. Okay,
Yeah.
love to end with you recommending a children's book. I know that saying favorite is just, too hard because there's too many, but
Favorite
you
is
love,
tough. Yeah.
one you love.
One I love that I haven't recommended too many times just yet, and I adored it. It was translated recently, and it is quite short, but it is perfect. It is, if you love books like The Alchemist or The Little Prince, or these kinds of books that are short but
Yeah.
wise, and the grown-ups could read it. It is called Glow Rushes.
I have
Um,
not heard of it.
yeah, by Piumini,
Okay.
Piumini.
Okay.
And he wrote it in the 1960s. It was only translated a couple years ago into English, and it is
Nice.
about an old master painter in what feels like fantasy Turkey. And the Sultan calls him to the palace late in his age,
Mm,
and tells him that his son, who is 8 years old, has a terminal illness, and he wants him to paint his bed chambers so that he can joyfully enjoy, whatever it is. And the story is a quiet little story about the friendship of this old painter and this young boy trying to decide what they're going to paint on these walls.
nice.
And it is beautiful. It's in that tradition of just classic picture books, right? Like, Charlotte's Web,
Nice.
where look, it's going to be a solid story, and but it's about this kind of these two who change each other's lives, and it's gorgeous. I think it's really good. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. I will have to check that one out.
Slow rushes. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Daniel, for taking the time today and
Yeah.
for all your work and all your writing.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Daniel Nayeri. He's just so fantastic. If you like my podcast, BookHuddle, could you take a quick second, do me a favor, and go and rate and review BookHuddle on your podcast platform? Because that really helps the podcast to grow and more people to find it, and it would just make my day.